All right, this is part 4 of the offseason. We just finished the 2009 NFL draft. Now we're going to break down each individual team's draft just for some more insight. First, we'll start off with the NFC North and specifically the Chicago Bears. So, as you probably recall, the very first pick was Mark Sanchez, 4th round. Malcolm Jenkins fell in the first round and fell out of the first round, and so they were able to snag him with the 4th overall pick in the second round. So they got their quarterback, got one of the better defensive players in that draft. Then they had Glenn Coffey, so he's probably not going to do much. We had D'Angelo Williams, probably their main source at running back. Not expecting much out of Glenn Coffey, to be honest. They even have Eric Shelton, which, not big of a deal there with the running game. Then they have Clint Sintum and Kevin Ogletree in the 4th round. And then Duke Robinson at offensive guard near the very end, just kind of help round out their offense there. Next, we have the Detroit Lions, where they have center Alex Mack, which was a great selection for them. Then they drafted Antoine Caldwell. So they had 2 offensive linemen with their first picks. Then the 3rd round, they went with Connor Barwin, tight end Zach Miller, who's going to be big for them. I mean, Kellen Winslow's been good for them, but he's been a 59 overall. So despite being such a low overall, it's going to be interesting to see how this team plays when they have technically a tight end that's 60 or above. Then Vance Walker at nose tackle, and then Pat McCaffrey and David Bueller. They needed both punter and kicker, and they were able to get both of those. So here's hoping that the Lions, that went 11-6 this year, are able to do a repeat with some of these additional, more so, I like to call the offensive line the infrastructure of the team. So they were able to boost that with Mack and Caldwell, and then even Zach Miller at tight end. Next, we have the Green Bay Packers, or the number 1 overall pick. So Stafford, obviously was a clear pick for them, needing quarterback. Jay Cutler is still on the team. I didn't really trade him away, or at least trade him away yet. LeSean McCoy, that's 2 of 2 excellent picks. Henry Melton is a good option there for defensive end, fits their scheme. They're going to a 3-4 defense. So that's a little different from their 4-3 that they had before. That was why Aaron Campman is out. They had their 2 nose tackles. That was Darnell Dockett and Vince Wilfork. So Dockett will be the left end, and Henry Melton will be the right end. And then you have Wilfork there in the middle. Fila Mola is there to add some depth for DT since we moved Darnell Dockett. Julian Edelman, great receiver there for them. All their receivers are like 61, 63 overall. They have Bryant Johnson, who did very well for them last year. He had 995 yards, 10 touchdowns, was their main target. They've got Derek Hagan, James Jones, but now they add Edelman, who's right now the highest overall rated receiver on their team. Donnell Ellerbe, likely starter for them. They got him in the 5th round. Jeremy Parnell, and then they had finished with 2 tight ends in the 7th round, Corey Sperry and Dan Gronkowski. Just wanted to draft Gronkowski, so we got the first Gronkowski in the league. We know that next year, I believe, 2010 or 2011 with Rob Gronkowski. Yeah, we'll figure it out later. But anyway, we got that for the 2009 draft for Packers. And then finishing up the NFC North, we have the Vikings with Max Unger with their first pick. Mike Wallace was there in the 2nd round, so I snagged him. A lot of receivers were going in this draft. Sean Smith, good pick there at corner. Jamon Meredith, more of a backup O-lineman. We have Brian Hoyer, who is now the backup quarterback for Brett Favre. I think that's a good pick there. Hoyer's only a 58 overall. I thought he was going to be a little bit better overall-wise. And then Ryan Palmer at cornerback, kind of rounding off the NFC North. Now for the AFC North, we have the Cincinnati Bengals getting their running back, which they haven't really successfully drafted in 7 years. So now they get their lead running back. They have Terrence Knighton and Chris Baker on the defensive line, Victor Butler, the outside linebacker, and then Greg Orton, actually pretty decent for a 6th-round receiver. He may not make the team. And then we have Frank Summers at fullback. I think he was the highest ranked, one of the top 4, I think, fullbacks. So I just went with him in the 7th round. Next up, we have the Cleveland Browns, who went with a lot of the picks that Eric Mangini did in real life. So we have B.J. Raji, who went to the Packers originally. So we have the solid nose tackle. But then Brian Robisky, Kaluka Mayava, Chris Obanaya, Jordan Norwood, and Corey Francis were all real picks that the Browns made. And I just ended up going with them. So B.J. Raji and Kevin Barnes were the two exceptions. I did not draft Muhammad Massaquoi. He ended up going to the Falcons. So it was picked by a Georgia team. But overall, Browns, you can let me know what your thoughts are, but they still got Robisky, who was an Ohio State Buckeye. Now we move off to the Baltimore Ravens. They get Vontae Davis with the first pick, and then Jared Cook at tight end. So they have Todd Heap, who's getting older. I think he's 29-ish. And now they get Jared Cook to be their second tight end. Good to see that transition going for Baltimore. Safety Mike Mitchell. They got the running back Rashad Jennings. So Jennings is going to be in there behind Ray Rice. So we'll see how Jennings does there. I mean, they still have Chester Taylor, but he's getting old. They got rid of Lawrence Maroney through the Packers in a trade. They did draft Jonathan Lewis and Kevin Huber, the punter. So they made some moves there for kind of finishing out their team there, getting that special teamer especially. And then we move to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who drafted Jerry, to help them with their DTs, who are very much older. Drafted offensive line Luis Vasquez, helping their O-line. Receiver Brandon Gibson, probably going to be more of a 4th, 5th option. Quinn Johnson at fullback, Keenan Lewis, and Jason McCourty at cornerback. So 2 decent cornerbacks there. Linebacker Ashley Palmer, Thomas Morstead at punter, and then John Parker Wilson being Mr. Irrelevant, and he's probably going to be irrelevant most of his career. I don't see him getting much of a chance to start for Pittsburgh, especially with Quinn and Pennington. But he likely will be on the practice squad and may be able to be snagged up by somebody if they need a quarterback. Now to the AFC East. We have Larry English helping the Buffalo Bills defense. Josh Freeman, the quarterback of the future, not of the now, unless, of course, they get fed up with Dante Culpepper, which I doubt they will. Then there's Patrick Turner, wide receiver. He's going to be a nobody. We look at Sherrod Martin, cornerback. We have O-line help there with Evan Smith and DeMar Dotson. Dotson was a surprise pick there. He was able to pick up that hidden dev. Then Brandon Myers at tight end, linebacker Cody Brown, and then middle linebacker Scott McKillop coming in there for some defensive, basically padding the roster for them on the defensive side of the ball. Next, we move to the Miami Dolphins with middle linebacker James Laurinaitis being one of the best picks there. He's going to be good for them for a long time. Pat White, who is not a very good quarterback, but he may get a chance to start this year due to McNair being gone. Lawrence Sidbury, defensive player there for pass rush. Brian Hartline from the Ohio State University, helping their receiving core. We got Glover Quinn, Don Carey, and Corvey Irvin. So Miami's got some talent there. I mean, some of the later picks, I don't know how effective they were, but we will definitely see how that works out. Moving on to New York. So the Jets bring in Percy Harvin. Great pick there. Definitely need it. So they have older Chad Ochocinco, and now you had Percy Harvin. Really good for them. They draft David Vicune, who I'm trying to remember if he was a Brown at first or if he was a Jet. At one point, I thought David Vicune played for them. Let me see. I'll double check that right now. But they do get the running back, Andre Brown, along with Craig Urbick, the right tackle. They went with two cornerbacks in a row, Chris Owens and Lydell Sargent, and Rhett Bomar, quarterback. Rhett Bomar was supposed to be a 3rd-round quarterback, I believe, but they took him in the 7th round. So Vicune was supposed to go to the Browns. I thought he was Jets, maybe because I saw Mangini and associated with them. But Vicune was the 2nd-round pick for the Jets. He's not probably going to go very far. And then lastly, the New England Patriots. Not really a great draft for them. They had Ellis Langster, who's not going to be that great of a cornerback, but took in the 1st round. Brandon Tate might be okay as a receiver. Him and Johnny Knox, a 2nd round and a 7th round receiver. Sebastian Vollmer, the best pick of their draft, probably will be a replacement O-lineman, maybe for Matt Light at left tackle. And then right end Maurice Evans there in the 4th round. Now for the NFC East. First up is the Dallas Cowboys. We see them starting off with Brian Orakpo. I think a fantastic selection. I was always a Brian Orakpo fan, one of my favorite picks of this draft. Second round pick went to the Falcons for some reason. I don't even remember when that trade happened or why that trade happened, but they lost their second round pick. They had James Casey, a tight end, and I think that's a very good addition for them. We're looking at a team that has Daniel Graham at 63 overall. James Casey could very well be that starting tight end Dallas needs. In my league, I kind of slowed down the progression, so tight ends tend to be very, how do I say? Tight ends are not in high volume of talent. There's not a lot of good tight ends. So Casey gives them that decent starter. They have their fourth round pick, A.Q. Shipley, center. Their fifth round pick was shipped away in the trade they just did this offseason with Ricky Williams. They have 2 sixth round picks. So Gerald McGrath at middle linebacker, Tiquan Underwood, and then cornerback Asher Allen. I'm not sure how many of those are going to be as impactful, but again, you can never have too many good linebackers. Next, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. So Ray Maluga was their first pick. Good pick there. Solid pick. Now, they traded away their second round pick for Amon Green to the Packers. So they got Green from Green Bay, and Green has been doing fantastic for them, except that he fumbled in the NFC Championship game when they were trying to run out the clock, and that allowed the 49ers to come down and kick the game-winning field goal. So aside from that, he was a top rusher for them. We see them all, the Eagles drafting right end Jarius Wynn, offensive lineman Garrett Reynolds, safety David Bruton. John Phillips is a tight end, late round pick. And then another guard, Seth Olson, to kind of finish that up. Then we have the New York Giants. And there we have Eugene Monroe, who kind of slipped out of the top 10 there. Second round pick gone. Bradley Fletcher, who is the cornerback. We have Tyron Green, guard, Chip Vaughn, defensive end, Slade Norris. I mean, arguably, you probably could say that this was one of the weaker drafts. I don't think there's as many good players on this slate than there was others. So, I mean, depends on who you ask, I suppose, but I would say this was probably one of the weaker ones. And then as for Washington, so Darius Haywood-Bay was definitely taken too high. But he was the first receiver taken off the board in real life by Oakland. And just because, again, not every team makes the best choice, Haywood-Bay is fast. He's very speedy. So we'll see how Michael Vick works with Darius Haywood-Bay. We see Ziggy Hood helping with the defense. So, I mean, that was the first defensive pick in the first 5 picks. Mike Goodson, running back. They only came into the draft with 1 running back, so I had to make some adjustments there. 2 offensive linemen with Kropog and Boone, and then 2 linebackers to finish up, just adding more depth to this NFC East team. And now to the NFC South. We'll start off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jeremy Maclin, excellent pick for them early in this draft. Definitely needing a playmaker on this team. They have Darren McFadden, who basically carried their team last year to 8-9. He should have been the Rookie of the Year, in my opinion, but they gave it to Chris Johnson. Maclin gives them someone to pass to. Then we see Ron Brace and Matt Shaughnessy, so 2 defensive line prospects. We also have Ladarius Webb, a DB, James Davis, who's going to be more of a backup. Then, of course, Colt Anderson, a free safety, and Fanuki Tupou at offensive tackle, just kind of filling that O-line spot. Then we have the Atlanta Falcons. So again, Clay Matthews, big pick there, good pick. They draft 3 offensive linemen, Robert Brewster, Ramon Foster, Lance Lewis. These are some picks that are helping them just kind of fill some gaps on their team. We see Richard Quinn, a tight end picked very early there in the second round. Ideally, I probably should have gone with a better tight end, but he was the top-ranked tight end and the scheme fit, so the Falcons decided to go with Richard Quinn. We have Muhammad Massaquoi. I ended up drafting him. One reason was because he's from Georgia, and I thought Georgia and the Atlanta Falcons would be a good fit. Massaquoi did not turn out to be that great of a receiver, so we'll just see how that goes. They did draft Dion Butler, who tends to rate a little bit higher than Massaquoi. We'll see who gets more attention early this season. I'll try to aim more toward Muhammad Massaquoi since he was the 3rd round pick as opposed to a 7th, but we'll just see how the season plays out. And then they do get a kicker, Graham Gano. Then for the Carolina Panthers, they get 3 cornerbacks. So I knew that was the weakest spot for the Panthers. I went with Alphonso Smith early. Then I went with Captain Munnerlyn and Donald Washington in the 6th and 7th round. Munnerlyn definitely could be a starter. We'll see if any of them are able to get past Dre Bly. But then, of course, we have Robert Ayers, another pass rusher for this Panthers defense. And the 2 offensive picks were Bear Pasco and Andrew Gardner. Then for the New Orleans Saints, we have Aaron Curry, a linebacker who's probably not rated as high as people expected him to be. But again, I have an expectation he's probably not going to live up to expectations. Then there's Kenny Britt. I think he's a very good 2nd round pick there. Definitely needing some more weapons on offense. They do have Antonio Bryant that they traded for from Denver when they got rid of Deuce McAllister. And then they have Brandon Marshall. So Kenny Britt is just a younger option to kind of be maybe a slot receiver for them. Josh McDaniels trying to rebuild this offense to his liking. They draft Stephen McGee. So for if Matt Leinart ends up dropping the ball, or Morelli, who's a 50 overall, doesn't live up to expectations, there is a rookie that could step in and see if he can have any chance at being a potential starter for them. Michael Johnson, Tony Fiamanita, Jasper Brinkley, EJ Biggers, Britton Colquitt. So we got some defense there with, of course, the fullback, and then Britton Colquitt, maybe one of the better punters coming out of this draft. AFC South with the Indianapolis Colts. We see Evan Britton at right tackle, kind of filling a need there, maybe a future tackle at left tackle to replace their current 31-year-old sitting there. I think it's Jeff Backus. Then there's Jason Williams at linebacker. They do draft Brad Jones in the 6th round, so they get 2 linebackers this draft. They draft safety William Moore, cornerback Gerard Powers, defensive tackle Sammy Hill, another offensive lineman, Rich Ornberger, definitely more of a backup just to kind of fill some of those spots. And then Gartrell Johnson. I don't see him playing much, especially with Chris Johnson. And they also have Chris Brown, Dominic Rhodes. This is a very hefty running back room, but not bad for a 7th round pick. Now moving on to the Jaguars. We have, of course, Jason Smith coming in at right tackle. Will be off the opposite side of Kwame Harris. Then, of course, Hakeem Nicks, good receiver there for them. Definitely a good pick, I believe. Nicks was one of those receivers that could have maybe even landed in the 1st round, but he slipped to the 2nd. And Jacksonville needed a playmaker ever since Roy Williams left them. And even Tyrone Calico left them for Cleveland, and he's been Cleveland's top receiver for the past 2 years. They also have DT and Derek Marks. The other defensive players who were near the end with Darcel Macbeth, free safety DJ Moore, cornerback, and Josh Maga at middle linebacker. Maga might be their 2nd middle linebacker on their depth chart. They do drop Bernard Scott and Anthony Hill on offense. I think Scott may get some attention, especially with Cedric Benson leaving. We'll see how that turns out for Jacksonville. Carrying on with the Houston Texans, they get some of their O-line infrastructure set with Andy Levitre. They also go for safety Luis Delmas, stick with defense the 3rd round with Brandon Williams as a pass rusher. With a wide receiver, they have Lewis Murphy, outside linebacker Maurice Foucault, however you want to pronounce his name. Strong safety, another safety with Jamarco Sanford, and then they spend their last pick on punter Tim Misthay. Lastly, for the AFC South, we have the Titans drafting Michael Orr. I know in the other video I forgot he didn't go to Tennessee. He went to Ole Miss. Then, of course, Patrick Chung, a strong safety, falling all the way to the 21st pick in the 2nd round. We have Derek Cox at cornerback. They do draft Curtis Painter at quarterback. Even though Kevin O'Connell did well last year, they're just adding someone maybe to be kind of to push him a little bit more. Dan Scuda at linebacker, Yoquan Iglesias at wide receiver, and then Davin Drew finishing up this draft with a tight end in the 7th round. Now off to the AFC West. Starting out, we have the Denver Broncos taking Aaron Mabin. Maybe not the best pick, but the defensive end, adding more depth to their defensive line. Ramses Barden. I like Ramses Barden. He's like 6'6" or something like that, so he's a really tall wide receiver. With my lack of quality tight ends, I might consider maybe moving him to tight end at some point. Cedric Pierman at running back. I mean, again, they lost Clinton Portis. They did trade for Deuce McAllister. They have Tashard Choice from last year. Now they add Cedric Pierman. Matt Slauson, decent guard, late round guard. And then, of course, we had outside linebacker Spencer Adkins, Sonny Harris, kind of finishing up that Denver draft. Then we have the San Diego Chargers, and they drafted Beanie Wells, likely to help replace LaDainian Tomlinson in the future. We'll see if he pans out. TJ Lang at left tackle and Paul Fanaka on the O-line, so the 2nd and 5th round pick there. They do get DeAndre Levy, outside linebacker in the 3rd round. He should be a likely starter for them. And then they get 2 defensive backs with their last 2 picks with Curtis Taylor and Brandon Hughes. So that's the San Diego draft. Then we have the Kansas City Chiefs, and again, they had the 6th pick with Tyson Jackson. They ended up going with Phil Lodeholt, so right tackle in their 2nd round. They take a tight end, Chase Kaufman, as well as Roy Miller, the defensive tackle, nose tackle. They draft running back LaRod Stevens Howling. They get a kicker, and Ryan Suckup was on the Kansas City Chiefs in real life. So he was selected now here in the 6th round. And then Austin Collie, the originally drafted by the Colts. Chiefs, I mean, a fair, modest draft here. Nothing too spectacular. But now we'll move on to Oakland. So Brian Cushing, probably one of the best picks in the draft. They got him at 15. They get Sean Green, so get some youth in that running back field with Willis McGahee, who's getting older now. He's been sticking around. But we got a quarterback for them last year with Matt Ryan. We got James Hardy, who is performing way beyond expectations. Then we add Sean Green, so getting more youth in this Oakland team. Specifically, so this is Mike Singletary's team moving forward. So he's making some good moves there. They do get Mike Thomas, another wide receiver, to help that receiving core, because Dwayne Jarrett and the other Reed and stuff like that, they're just not going to cut it as receivers. Eric Wood was drafted as a center, and that's going to be some good help on their O-line. Michael Bennett, a good mid-round pick there, the defensive end. Cameron Mora at tight end. And then they finish off with Bryce McCain and Ryan Mountain as their 2 cornerbacks for the last few picks. Then we have the NFC West to finish everything out. We see with the Cardinals going first, Andre Smith with the 7th overall pick. We also see Donald Brown taken in the 2nd round. So they got rid of Ricky Williams. So they signed Darren Sproles, but now they've added a running back, rookie. Brown likely will start. I think he has the highest overall of all those running backs on their team now. Tight end Travis Beckham was also taken in the 2nd round. Stanley Arnaud, middle linebacker. Vaughn Martin, DT. They ended up getting a defensive back there with Greg Toller. Chase Daniel with the 5th round pick. And then free safety CJ Spillman. And now we move on to the San Francisco 49ers, where they had Darius Butler, the cornerback, picked on 31. They drafted Everett Brown with a 2nd round pick. Will Beatty, the offensive tackle there. Arian Foster, yeah, he was undrafted in real life. There weren't many running backs to pick from. I mean, there weren't many good ones. I had them go with Foster. He will likely be a force to be reckoned with. He will probably challenge Gore for the starting role, and it might be a dual back system. I might let Foster take over. I don't know. Then we see Desmond Bryant with the 5th round. Jonathan Casillas, whatever, outside linebacker, and then Victor Harris, a safety, finishing up the the San Francisco 49ers. Then we move to the St. Louis Rams, getting their 2nd top-tier receiver. They've got Roy Williams. Now they have Michael Crabtree. Then Jarius Byrd was sitting there at round 2, and that was another excellent pick. I don't know if I'll keep Byrd at cornerback or if I move him to safety as he did in real life. We look at tight end Sean Nelson, Alex McGee, Rashad Johnson, the safety, C.J. Davis at offensive guard. Defensive tackle Clinton McDonald and Kyle Moore. So a decent spread there, a lot on the defensive line, but major picks for those first two, hitting them spot on. Neither one of those are going to be a miss. And our last team to analyze is the Greg Schiano Seattle Seahawks, with Pettigrew being taken first. Paul Kruger is on a defensive line that is very stacked. There's a lot of good players on that defensive line, so Kruger might not get much playing time, but he does add a lot of depth to the Seahawks defense. Then, of course, Javon Ringer at running back, Nate Davis at quarterback, just to give a potential backup to Tavares Jackson beyond Seneca Wallace. Jerron Gilbert was in the 4th round of DT, Chris Clemens at free safety, and then Tyrone McKenzie at outside linebacker. So there you have it, the 2009 NFL Draft. Let me know what you think. If you feel there's a certain team that did better than another or outperformed another, let me know. Or if you feel that there were some good picks or bad picks, let me know. But just keep in mind that when I'm drafting for these teams, I'm trying to draft it with as much current time knowledge as opposed to future knowledge. So, like, for example, the Jason Smith pick or the Aaron Curry pick were probably bad picks, but they looked good at the time. And so, like, Darius Haywood-Bay might look like a bad pick if he was reached on, but if Darius Haywood-Bay becomes a Pro Bowler with Michael Vick, that could change everything. So that's what's really exciting about this 32-team franchise, is you never know whose career I'm going to ruin and whose career I'm going to ascend. So I hope you enjoyed this offseason and this recap. Stay tuned for more videos coming up about the upcoming season. Thank you for watching.